I just don't believe in the idea of marketing out of fear. It's almost like, hey, we have to get out of this space and we need to retreat. And all it does is just allows room for your competitors to take your spot. It's like if you're not advertising, and that, like, say if you were once advertising on Google Ads and then you decide, well, we're going to reduce our budget, then that means your ads are showing less and there still has to be ads running the whole time. So the fact that you retreat, someone else is going to advance, right? Because that's really what it means. Like, someone's advancing while you retreat. So it's like, in that situation, I don't think it's a wise thing to always pull back in those situations and just give up territory to your competitors who are going to be more aggressive, who's going to just look at these downturns as opportunities. And the reality is that normally in an economic downturn, the thing that really gets impacted first is luxury items. So it's like if you're going out and buying multi-million-dollar homes or, yachts, for example, is probably a luxury good. That would be something that would get hit if the economy goes down. Everyday items, they don't go down as much as what people think they do. So it's not like, okay, well, I'm no longer going to advertise my services as, we'll just say, like doing lawn care because, well, people will stop spending. And it's like, well, that's not necessarily true because people still need to get their grass cut. That need doesn't stop just because the economy went down. However, if I'm going to go on a boat and just go on cruises, that's not a necessity. So I may cut those expenses. And if for those type of companies, they have to attack their marketing in a different type of way, right? It doesn't mean that I'm going to stop marketing just because the market is not as hot as it once was. I'm now going to do different incentives, different deals. I'm going to do things that at that point to separate myself from the competitors so I can still have these constant loyal customers that didn't get affected by the economic downturn. I just don't think you should have a mentality of fear anyways when it comes to your marketing. Really it's got to be a mentality of optimization, about improving. So it's like, well, instead of looking at reducing the budget, look at how do we maximize it? Do we need to maybe take from one channel and pour into one channel that's working even more than the other one, right? So generally when times are good, companies tend to be more experimental. They tend to want to try to find channels that they weren't currently in to see if they could continue the growth. For example, a company might be doing well on Facebook ads, and they're like, hey, let's go ahead and test some LinkedIn ads. We have the extra budget. We're going to go ahead and do it. And so that's what I mean by these companies will tend to do that when it's doing really well. Okay, now that there's this economic downturn, or like when COVID happened, and there was all these companies that were like retreating. And you can see now the companies that are really flourishing are the ones that didn't retreat, that all they did was adjust and maneuver their budgeting. So it's like, okay, well, maybe I won't be on television as much. Instead, I'm going to take that budget and pour all the way into Google Ads, because at this point, our competitors are backing out. I still want to stay in front of our customers, but I'm going to take up all the ads I can on this space because we're already getting tons and tons of leads on AdWords. So let's go ahead and just triple that. Let's magnify that. So, but that's not what companies do when they're based on fear. Instead, what they do is say, let's cut television. Let's also cut Google AdWords. Let's find every little way to get these extra dollars. And it's like, well, anybody who's been in the stock market for a long time understands that you constantly keep buying stocks, even when the market's going down, because it's a long-term play. It's the same thing. Like, you have to have the same mentality when it comes to advertising. You have to look at it from an investment level. And when times are down, that means your cost per click is going to be lower because it's not as competitive. And I saw it too with a lot of these broadcasting networks that they were charging less for those slots than they were like just before the pandemic happened, because so many of these advertisers were jumping ship. So now you're getting even more and more space for at a much cheaper price. So the reality is actually your marketing should be cheaper for that visitor than it was when times are really good. And so some key tips to look for when you're going through your data. It's like, say, for example, if you're comparing two different landing pages, stuff that you want to look at is like your bounce rate. How quickly is someone bouncing off that page compared to the other page? Because then it gives you an idea of which page you need to use for certain type of search terms, for example, on Google Ads. And it gives you an idea of like, okay, say if I have a general term, which is something that's like a non-branded keyword. So, for example, it'd be like if you were in the heating and air business, you might put heating and air conditioning services. That's just a broad term, right? So that's where you want to start kind of looking in your analytics and saying, okay, this page has a lower bounce rate than this page. Then you're also looking at session duration, which is like how long somebody is staying on that page or staying on your website. So if person is staying on this page longer than another page, one, it gives you a lot more abilities to remarket that customer. And it's also showing you that the information that you have on that page is more impactful than the other page. So even if, say, the other page may be converting more, like you're like, well, this page has a higher bounce rate. The session duration is high. It's not as high as this other page, but we're getting more conversions. Then that's where you want to look at that and say, okay, maybe the call to action is in a certain location on that page, which is what's really driving the conversion. And if I have some heat maps on there and I can start seeing like, oh yeah, this position is working better than this other page, then you want to modify the page that's getting the higher session duration and a lower bounce rate. So these are some of the tips that you want to look at with your analytics, because unless you are someone who specializes in analytics, that's a lot of data to look at. And it can be super overwhelming for people. Like, well, I don't know what I should be looking at here. I'm looking at entry points, exit points. I'm looking at geography. I don't know which information. I'm looking at events, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like you really want to keep these things simple and just look at what's the behavior. And the behavior is really like how much they're interacting with your website. Are they going to multiple pages? They're staying on there a long time? Or are they leaving right away? So if you just kind of simplify the way that you look at your data, it's going to help inform your decisions. This is why it's important to use value as a way to sell your items, because it's like if you're using discounts, then basically you're saying like you are a cheap brand or you're kind of like a Dollar Tree. And there's a lot of value to that if that's your overall strategy to say like, we're going to corner the market for being cheap. But if you're not a cheap brand and you're going backwards, then that's not a great strategy. You're right, because you are transforming your brand from something that may have been seen as a luxury item to now being a cheap brand. And it's going to hurt your recognition. It's going to hurt your equity that you put into the brand, when you should actually be pushing more into creating value. So if you're like, okay, everything is going down, people are not spending as much, instead of us discounting, let's create a strategy around building more value for why our product is necessary for our customers. That even like what you're saying, even when times are bad, people are saving, they're putting away. Like this is critical for them to have no matter what their situation is. So you can do that in a lot of different ways, whether it's through your salespeople and just say, hey, look, you get in front of the customers. Don't spend all this time talking about discounts. Build the value of our product. Value, 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 value. If someone calls in the company, value, value, value. And that's through maybe customer service, great customer service. It can be into really highlighting the problems that your product solves. And it doesn't have to just be one problem. It can be a multitude of problems, but customers really need to understand the transformation that's going to happen with your product. And the best way to do that is through building value instead of trying to do it through discounts.